It is the world's most secretive election. When a pope dies, ancient traditions begin. A silver hammer, a destroyed ring, over 100 cardinals locked away from the world, choosing the next leader of 1 billion faithful. White smoke. The path to a new pope, from Calaroga Shark Media, wherever you get your podcasts.
Calaroga Shark Media.
Hello, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. I am psyched for today. As I put it together, there were different names in the news, which was just so refreshing for me. And as I soul-searched about that, I started thinking about Bill Burr and how has Bill Burr gotten us to a place where it's like, you know, Bill, you need to disappear for 3 months. Now, you've heard me say this in the past about like Gaffigan needed to tap the brakes, and he has. Jim took my advice, right? We haven't heard from Jim in a bit, but Bill needs to go away for a little bit now. It's just so weird. I'll talk about Conan tomorrow, as I don't have the information yet as I record this in the middle of Sunday afternoon. Often I don't record on Sundays, so it's nice, and the news cycle's a little different. I'll start with The Times of London, the Sunday version of The Times, and they had a profile with Jimmy Carr, who explained how to get a laugh. I think Jimmy might actually be my favorite living comedian. I try to see him whenever I can. I always find his shows excellent. Anyway, Jimmy says to get a laugh, you do the opposite of what is expected. So someone who doesn't do physical comedy doing a pratfall is funny. It's the thing about jokes being the sudden revelation of a previously concealed fact. Every joke is 2 stories, and the first story sets up an assumption that turns out to be erroneous. It's the same structure, whether you're doing clever wordplay or falling over. That's really smart. Obviously, Jimmy, a top comedian. The Times was curious why music venues are struggling and stand-up seems to be thriving. Carr said, because comedy clubs deliver week in, week out. What do you want from a night out? A couple drinks, something to eat, and a great laugh. My thing about comedy as a function in society is that it opens up the window of what you can and can't talk about, not just edgy topics. Even if you do mainstream observational stuff, the audience go, oh, we can complain about life a little bit. It gives you permission to have conversations you wouldn't otherwise. It's like you put on magical glasses and see everything in a slightly funnier way. It was an interview with a comedian, so of course, you can't say anything anymore. The Times phrased it as, are there things people used to find funny they don't anymore? Carr said, I think there's a broader church now than ever before. Britain's Got Talent last year was won by a clown act. There's mime, too. Comedy feels much more open. It's weird. While ITV and the BBC were fighting over Saturday night ratings, YouTube just stole their lunch and streamers are stepping up, too. Netflix has done a tremendous amount for stand-up, though I did realize the other day that Jeffrey Dahmer has more Netflix specials than I have. It's an interview with a comedian, so we'll talk about getting canceled. Jimmy explains, intention is important. With me, it's clear what the intention of the evening is, but the way it can get reported is if you're shouting jokes through someone's letterbox at 9 a.m. I subscribe to the benign violation theory that jokes are benign violations. You take a violation, no matter how extreme, but make it benign by joking about it. Jokes can be a way of making sense of stuff. Think about how we use humor in our lives when something terrible happens. Never mind on stage. There's a lot of laughter around grief, death, and disease. There's a real functionality to it. It makes something okay. It's slightly playing with fire, but you don't choose your sense of humor. It chooses you. It's like sexual taste. Some like it spicy. Others prefer milder stuff, but you don't fake a laugh. And Jimmy talked about clapter. Quoting him exactly, I have this thing I call clapter, where an audience are just applauding, clapter, not laughter. I watch out for that because that's just people agreeing with you. Too easy. It's too easy to say, Trump's a dummy. There's nothing in that. But also, I don't want it just to be a shock, an inhalation of breath, and a nervous laugh. It's got to be a belly laugh followed by an intake of breath. It has to be the right way around because shock is nothing. It's got to be funny first and foremost. Good stuff there. Chris Gethard had a note for John Mulaney. Again, I haven't seen episode 2 of Mulaney yet, but I'm seeing mixed buzz at best. Some people are like, okay, it's quirky, but I'm not seeing anyone saying it's great, which is a shame. Some people are comparing Mulaney's show to what Chris Gethard used to do on his show. And Chris tweeted, I really love Everybody's Live, and I'm probably more fascinated at its existence than anyone on Earth, and I want it to succeed on a massive scale. So please, guys, let's get John an in-ear monitor for the phone calls, and just let me know if I can help in any other way. As somebody who has produced a lot of talk radio over the years, I can tell you, and I screen calls better than anybody in the game. I challenge all of you. I will screen calls better than you. I'm really, really, really good at it. And I will tell you, after the first sentence out of the caller's mouth, it's diminishing returns. And you have to prep the caller and go, okay, Shirley, when you get on, make sure you tell host, hey, I just wanted to say that I think blue umbrellas are stupid. Just get right to your point. And then from there, it's diminishing returns. And John is putting civilians on the air live, and that's why it's a mess. So I'll give the same note I did from the LA series. Stop doing the segment. It doesn't work. That said, I don't think Mulaney cares that he just wants to do this quirky, weird show and Netflix is paying for it. Whatever. Steve Byrne talked to Fox News Digital, thanks to DR, who shared this in the Facebook group, Daily Comedy News Podcast group. I had just put together the show and then popped on Facebook really quickly because I wanted to tell you guys this week I'm speaking to Jason Zinnemann from the New York Times. He's going to be one of my guests about Hedberg, but I wanted to ask you guys anything you want me to ask Jason while I have him. So if there is something, throw it in the Facebook group. You'll see the post there. And I had just put together the show with the Steve Byrne thing, and I saw DR had shared the interview. So we're thinking of each other. Thank you for sharing it. Steve Byrne told Fox News Digital, Hollywood today could do a better job allowing comedians to be funny. I fear that my kids are growing up in a generation that isn't going to have those kind of like communal jokes or communal scenes or all these cultural references that we all grew up with. 100% on that. And I think that's just gone. Byrne said Hollywood's not making comedies. They're not taking chances. Comedians were never selling out arenas to the degree we have multiple comedians out there that are now arena acts. That's because Hollywood has failed in terms of filling the void with comedies, and so people are getting their fix in arenas. That's interesting, right? Because you like to go out for a night, and back in the day, you'd be like, oh, a Bill Murray movie. Thanks for the 50-year-old reference there, John. You know what I mean, but we don't do that anymore. And I guess it gets back to what Carr was saying earlier. You know, it's nice to have a night out. I went out with the boys on Saturday afternoon to watch some college basketball. I had just spent a week in Dublin in the bars every night, and I wanted to see my friends. And we sat there and we had a beverage or two and some food and stared at sports. And it's nice. It's nice to go out. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Byrne said, I think if Hollywood was smart, they'd let some of these guys go for it and not be too restrictive in terms of like, obviously what Bill Burr has done, what Shane Gillis has done. Those are blueprints. Obviously, there's a desire for someone to let them take that into a narrative form and make films. Byrne finds the entertainment industry progressive and left as a whole. I think that's why people are leaving traditional outlets to go to Your Mom's House or Rogan's podcast, because they're getting their fix from these other mainstream elements that, you know, pretty much only primarily support people that agree with them and play in their same sandbox. I think being a stand-up is the greatest job in the world. The fact that you could take something relatable or something you just pull out of the ether and you bring it to a room full of strangers and elicit just a single emotion, which is laughter, there's nothing better than that. Steve Byrne's favorite comedian? Brian Callen. Makes me laugh like nobody else. He's so smart, so gifted, so talented, and he just genuinely makes me laugh. Joe Gatto released a statement after a woman accused him of sexual assault in a TikTok. Joe said he had, quote, used poor judgment, unquote, in the past, but, quote, wouldn't assault anyone, unquote. The TikTok user said she had met Gatto in 2023 when she was 19. Her claim is that she began texting him after approaching him in a restaurant in hopes of getting a free ticket to the show. She alleges Gatto gave her a pair of tickets, and they continued to text. She claims they eventually wound up in a hotel room, and some stuff happened. She didn't go into detail what had occurred. I'm not pulling my punch there. She didn't share it. In one of her subsequent posts that day, she wrote, I got sexually assaulted by Joe Gatto, the Impractical Joker. Gatto issued a statement on Saturday, which reads, I have used poor judgment and as a result have violated the trust of the people I love most, but anyone who knows me at all knows full well that I wouldn't assault anyone. Working on myself is an ongoing process, and I'm now going to take some time away from the public eye to focus my energies where I need to. Joe had left the Jokers in 2021. At that time, he cited issues in my personal life and announced that he and his wife had been splitting up. In an Instagram post, he wrote, sorry in advance for the long and more serious than usual note below. I just wanted to let you all know I'll no longer be involved with Impractical Jokers. Alongside my friends, I've devoted a decade of my life to building the franchise and couldn't be prouder of what has been accomplished. However, due to some issues in my personal life, I have to step away. Bessie and I have decided to amicably part ways, so now I need to focus on being the best father and co-parent to our two incredible kids. Rob Schneider has suggested that Kate McKinnon's presidential election cold open, the one where she sang Hallelujah as Hillary Clinton, was the end of Saturday Night Live. Schneider told Glenn Beck, I hate to crap on my own show. When Hillary Clinton lost, which is understandable, she's not exactly the most likable person in the room. And then when Kate McKinnon went out there on SNL in the cold opening and all that and started dressing as Hillary Clinton, she starts playing Hallelujah. I literally prayed, please have a joke at the end. Don't do this. Please don't go down there. There was no joke at the end, and I went, it's over. It's not going to come back. He then talked about the late night hosts, specifically Kimmel and Colbert. You could take the comedic indoctrination process happening with each of the late-night hosts, and you could exchange them with each other. That's how you know it's not interesting anymore. Andrew Schultz told Dax Shepard the secret to Trump's success is that Trump doesn't sound rich. Schultz said, that's what people don't like to acknowledge. Trump doesn't sound rich when he talks, he sounds poor. Schultz continued and said the face of the Democratic Party should not be like a fourth-generation trust fund Nepo baby who's never had a real job, like telling working-class Americans what they should do. Trump talks like he's from the neighborhood. Schultz talked about a press conference where Trump was asked, and what happens if Russia doesn't do the ceasefire? What will happen? And then he goes, what if someone drops a bomb and it blows on your head? That's how Frank from the neighborhood would answer a question. So he communicates in a way that is super relatable to these people, despite his life not being at all relatable. Jeff Dunham told Fox Trump's win is a weight off comics back so they can get back to joking around. He says, you feel like you can now joke about the things we used to joke about. Dunham calls comedy one of the last forms of free speech, and the fact in the past few years that was trumped on, Tromped. That's not a word that I'm familiar with. I'm getting what it means from the context clues. It's an interesting word to use, especially when we're talking about Trump. Let's see. Oxford says Trump is an informal North American word that means trudge or stamp on. An example being, Larry took a step forward and trumped on his wrist. I feel like I'm going to hear from people from other parts of the country who are like, don't you know what trumped is? We didn't use trumped in Queens. Anyway, Dunham says, to me, a comedian takes it to the line. He knows his audience, his or her audience. You take it to the line, and you may step over it a little bit. So to me, I've always believed that if I'm offending 3 to 5% of the room, then that's the entertainment that everybody else is laughing the hardest at. And that's why they keep coming back, because they're hearing stuff they don't get to hear anywhere else. Some of Dunham's characters include Jose Jalapeno and Ahmed the Dead Terrorist. But speaking of Jeff Dunham, when I was programming Sirius, hey, you guys can drink. I know you guys are like, stop talking about when you're on Sirius. It's kind of relevant to what we do here at the show. But in the aughts, Jeff Dunham was huge. We had the daily request show, and Dunham would get requested every day. And, you know, that's a ventriloquist on the radio, and people couldn't get enough of the characters. Dunham said, well, when it comes to the characters, inventing the characters, responding to what's going on. Like I said, it's responding to what's going on in society and what I think the audience is to laugh at. And then it's literally coming up with topics and subject matter that people can relate to. Same with the character. They have to be relatable. And people, as you know, accuse me of having stereotypes of my characters. Like, yeah, that's the point. You've got this grumpy old man. He's a grumpy old man. You've got this redneck, borderline white trash. People understand that. And then they expect a certain kind of material and a certain personality, and that works for you. It's just like a sitcom. I don't disagree with anything he said there. People need to lighten back up. It is nice to see the sea change. We can goof on each other and still be friends. It's wonderful. So yeah, Walter dressed up like Trump, and then he dressed up like Biden with the videos. He talked specifically about Ahmed, which he said was his response to 9/11. Dunham said he refused to play it safe with the character, stating at the time he decided, I'm not going to go to Hawaii or Alaska or someone in California to try this. I'm going to go to where it counts. And I was booked at a club called Bananas Comedy Club 6 miles from Ground Zero. He introduced the character as Osama bin Laden at the New York club. It was like God took a vacuum and sucked all the air out of the room. However, he recalls as soon as he brought out the funny-looking skeleton puppet and ad-libbed the character's infamous I kill you catchphrase, the show could not have gone better, Jeff says. It couldn't have gone better, and just went from there. Jeff is not happy with the states of California, telling Fox, I feel this beautiful state has been politically run to the ground, and it's unfortunate because it's one of the most beautiful states in the country. The LA Times profiled Trey Crowder. Isn't this fun? We're talking about different people today. The headline, too liberal for the South, too redneck for LA. The LA Times asked Trey about his liberal positions on politics. Trey said, people are definitely bummed out and feeling weird. The response has been pretty positive after the shows and whatnot, because I do talk about politics a little bit, but then I also talk about a whole bunch of other things that have nothing to do with that, and it's a welcome distraction for people. So they get a little bit of what they expect, but then also a little bit of diversion at the same time. But when I'm actually talking to people off stage, the morale generally is not super high right now. I've never really believed that comedy changes too many people's minds or anything like that, but I do think it can serve an important purpose. When it comes to things that are too hard for some people to talk about or think about, comedy just kind of takes the edge off that. So I do think that can help and be important. Also, people find it relatable, but I don't think there's too many comedy conversations happening. On Gossip Corner, Ali Wong was seen with Bill Hader at a Vietnamese restaurant in San Francisco. Turtle Tower thanked Wong and Hader for stopping by the Financial District restaurant. They posted on social media as great food and even better company. We're thrilled to be back in San Francisco and so grateful for all the love and support. A huge thank you to Ali Wong and Bill Hader for stopping by this week and showing love to our small business. It truly means the world to us. Wong grew up in San Francisco and named Turtle Tower as one of her favorite restaurants in the city back in 2019. Cameron Esposito has announced a new stand-up special. 4 Pills will debut on the streaming platform Dropout on April 11th. I'm not familiar with Dropout. Let's see what they got. I feel so refreshed today talking about other things. Let's see. Dropout, independent, ad-free, uncensored comedy. Oh, I should befriend these guys. I'll reach out to them after we're done recording here. Maybe they'll be nicer to me than the Hulu publicists. Grrr. Cameron Esposito special guides the audience on a surreal journey through the ups and downs of her bipolar disorder diagnosis, with detours to talk about marriage, divinity school, and one extremely unlucky dog. Uh-oh. Cameron says, when you do this job, the number one thing people say is, I don't know how you can do that job. Stand-up is my biggest fear, and I've always said, well, it's just because it's not my biggest fear. Nice job by Michael Blackson. He donated $10,000 to his old high school, John Bartram High School in Southwest Philadelphia. He graduated from there in 1990. Blackson said, I try to tell these kids every time, listen, man, you can be from the streets, but you don't have to be in the streets, you know? And you have to think about ways of getting out of the street, and hopefully I got to them today. Sometimes they need people like me to come talk to them, and I hope a lot of other people will go to their alma mater and talk to these kids and give them hope. Robert Smigel has released a lost TV Funhouse from 2003. It had been abandoned in the middle of production. The topic was George W.'s invasion of Iraq. In it, they depict Bush attempting to take down a hive of honeybees. Smigel posted on the Triumph YouTube channel, to many people, the idea of liberating the civilians while killing thousands of them and destabilizing the region seemed hollow, especially with Dick Cheney's conflicts of interest regarding the valuable oil resources there. So he started to make a TV Funhouse cartoon marking the endeavor. In the cartoon, Bush, voiced by Robert Smigel, is in the Oval Office presenting alternative programming that Americans can watch to avoid the stress of war coverage, specifically a show called President Bush's World of Adventure. In it, George W. presents the honeybee as an international threat who attacks innocent people. He teams up with Dick Cheney, Colin Powell, and Donald Rumsfeld. Remember those names? Boy, you're taking me back here. To take down the root of the problem, the dictator, Queen Bee. Dick Cheney reassures viewers, it's not for the honey. Smigel explains why it never aired. Within a few weeks, Baghdad fell, and any skepticism about the war was drowned out by the majority, energized by the civilians taking down Saddam's statue. So I hesitated, concerned about taking on the prevailing wind. We bailed on finishing the cartoon, the only time that ever happened. It's not our funniest, and it would have surely bombed with an audience at that time, but yeah, it doesn't feel great I've backed out. And that is your comedy news for today. If you enjoy the program, tell a friend about it. Hopefully they would like it too. You know, you could share an episode. This is a pretty good episode. You can share this one on social media. Many ways to support the show. You could sign up for calaroga.com/plus. For $5 a month, you'll get this show and a bunch of the others on the network ad-free. If you're on Apple Podcasts, click that banner that says uninterrupted listening. You can also buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. And I have big news on the coffee front. The national donuts chain, pistachio. Yeah. My go-to is caramel. And I like to mix it up because, you get the same thing every day for months and years. It gets a little boring. I do really like the butter pecan, but as an old guy now, the butter pecan and kidney stones seem to go hand in hand, so I don't mess with that. But the pistachio is delicious and so far not causing kidney stones. Hello from Old Man Mountain. I know. As I remind my kids, I was 20 once. I met up with a friend in Dublin that used to hang out with me in the 90s. So it was interesting to see my kids meet someone else who knew stories from when I was their age. So yeah, I went out with my friends on Saturday. I mentioned that earlier in the show. And we had a couple beers and what were we talking about? We talked about something about health that was just so old man. And I'm like, listen to us old fuddy-duddies. It happens, kids. It will happen to you, too. Right now, there is some 9-year-old kid who's going to hate your music. Yeah. All right. That's enough. See you tomorrow.
If you're fascinated by UFOs, aliens, ghosts, demons, cryptid creatures like Bigfoot, Chupacabra, and Mothman, then I have the show for you. The Paranormal 60 with Dave Schrader. Each week, we investigate different claims of the supernatural and try to shed light into the darkness, bringing you the top guests and experts from around the world. Enter the fray. Then join me, Dave Schrader, your host, as we investigate all aspects and claims of the supernatural and paranormal. Listen on all of your favorite podcast platforms: Good Pods, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, Deezer, Player FM, Amazon Music, Audible, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. The answers to life's biggest questions and miracles and mysteries awaits you. So join me each week, 2 brand new episodes of the best in paranormal podcasting, The Paranormal 60. with Dave Schrader.